Okay, we are on lesson 11.2 now, and so we start with just a review from the last class. Is remember the conditional statement is in the if-then format. And so we would want to add an if at the beginning. So if 21 is the legal drinking age, well, we need to talk to a person. So we'd say if you are 21, then you are legal drinking age. And there's different ways you can turn things into a conditional statement, but you have to make sure you have a if-then there and it follows the original sentence. So our hypothesis part of that, remember, is the if statement without the if. So that would be the you are 21. And then the conclusion would be you are legal drinking age. Right. If you'll remember from last week or last lesson, the converse is just where we switch it. That is a word you'll have to have memorized by the end of this unit. So remember, converse means we switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So we start with the you are legal drinking age. So if you are legal drinking age, then you are 21. So that is our converse. We switched our hypothesis and our conclusion. And then we're going to check and say, is it true or not? Well, no. If you're legal drinking age, you can be any age, 21 or older. So we'd say no. The counterexample would be if you are 30, or 22, or 90. So any of those is over 21 is technically over legal drinking age. So it's not, the converse of that statement is not always true. So now we have a couple new vocab words that you're going to add to the vocab list at the beginning of your packet. So negation means the denial of a statement. So negation is a word you'll have to know. Shorthand to that is you add not, is what we do when we take the inverse of something. So inverse and negation go together. Inverse, and if you can think of it, maybe say the and goes along with not, but inverse means we add not to hypothesis and conclusion. So the inverse of this statement is just not. So if you pass the EOC test, then you will graduate. And so we're just going to change it to if you do not, and there's my not that I added, pass the EOC test, then you will not graduate. And if you notice, I did add words like do and will in there just so that my sentence still makes sense. So once you have that, go ahead and flip to the next page. And so here we're going to do our inverse and check it for truth. So if school is in session, then it is a weekday, because we don't do school on weekends, at least not in this district. So our inverse, if school is not in session, then it is not a weekday. So think about that. Is it true or false? And if it's false, what makes it false? So hopefully you figured out by now that would be false, because we can have holidays or summer, where there are school is not in session, but it is still a weekday. And so that's our counter example, is times and holidays in summer when school is not in session, but it is a weekday. Alright, and next word that you'll add to the vocab list in your packet is contrapositive. Contra, like think of contrary, like against. So contrapositive is against, and so it's switching everything up. So it's negating the hypothesis and the conclusion of the converse. So our shorthand, the way we remember that, contrapositive, we're changing everything. We switch it and we add not. And so the easiest way to do that is usually go ahead and write the converse first and then add not to it. So if you run a red light, then you are breaking a traffic law. Our converse is where we switch, so that's our hypothesis, that's our conclusion, and so we start with the conclusion. So if you are breaking a traffic law, then you ran, or I could say are running, figure out what verb works best for you there, a red light. And then contrapositive is just to add not. So if you are not breaking a traffic law, then you are not running a red light. And so we added not to both parts of the converse. So from the original, we switched it. So the run the red light is now in our conclusion, and our original conclusion is now the hypothesis. We switched it and then added not. And now we can check it for truth. If you run the red light, you are breaking a traffic law. That's true. If you are breaking a traffic law, then you ran a red light. Well, not necessarily. There are a lot of other traffic laws besides running a red light. So that second statement I would say is false. You'd be speeding or something else. So our middle one is not true. But when we get back to the contrapositive, where we switched and added not, if you are not breaking a traffic law, then you are not running a red light. That's true again. There's no way to run a red light and not be breaking a traffic law, and so that goes back to our true. Alright, so then flip on over to your final page of notes. And this is just more practice. So our contrapositive, so remember contrapositive is when we switch and add or not. So we're starting with you must take the pass. So if you must take the pass, and then we're also adding not, so if you must not, or if you do not take the pass, then you cannot, or will not, or are not leaving the classroom. And so we switched the hypothesis and the conclusion, and then we added our not in here, not in here. If you do not take the pass, then you cannot leave the classroom. Is that true or false? I would say that is true. In this class, you cannot leave my classroom unless you have a pass and your ID. And so, counterexample, is not applicable. We don't need a counterexample. Alright, and last of all, here's a big one. We're doing everything with this. And so, in this conditional state, write the conditional statement, then do its converse, which remember is where we switch, inverse, where we add the not, and contrapositive, which is switch and not. So, you must pass the driving test in order to get your driver's license. So our conditionals are basic if-then. So, alright, so this one's a little bit trickier, because if we read our statement, you must pass the driving test in order to get your driver's license. That doesn't quite work when we say, if you must pass your driving test, then you get your driver's license. To keep the truth of the original statement here, we kind of need to switch it up and say, if you can get your driver's license, then you have passed your driving test. That's what maintains the truth of the original statement. So that's what we're going to list as our conditional. So we took the truth of the original statement, put it into if-then format. So now converse is where we switch. And so if you passed your driving test, then you can get your license. And we look at that and say, well, that's not entirely true. There's other steps to getting your license, like getting in your driver's ed or your driving hours. And so that's not necessarily a true statement. The first one is, though. We could call that true. There's not a way to get your driver's license without passing a driving test. Inverse goes back to the original, and we add not. So if you cannot get your driver's license, then you did not pass your driving test. And that has about the same level of truth as the converse. Both of those are usually true, because usually driving test is the last step, and so you get your license after that. But you could take the driving test and fail the eye exam, or just not have everything else in order that you need. So those are both false. There are some counterexamples. So now, contrapositive, we go back to the converse. So from the original, we switch it and add not. So if you did not pass your driving test, then you cannot get your driver's license. And we look at that again. If you did not pass your driving test, then you cannot get your driver's license. And that again is true. So the contrapositive and conditional will have the same level of truth. If the conditional is true, contrapositive will be true. Converse and inverse may or may not be true if the original statement is true.